My dad fell in love with Montana the summer after he graduated from high school. He graduated from Muskegon High School in Michigan, and for some reason, I don't remember exactly why, he came out to Hamilton, Montana, spent the summer in a fire tower west of Hamilton in the Bitterroot Mountains, just almost to the border of Idaho. That must have been a great experience. I know he has not this picture, but my mom has this black and white picture that my dad took of that fire tower, and I remember some of the stories he would tell, but he went back to Michigan after that summer, went to college, graduated, got married the year that he graduated, ended up getting licensed as a civil engineer and a land surveyor, and started his own consulting engineering practice in Traverse City, Michigan with a partner. And Dad worked at that for a number of years. Apparently he never forgot Montana, though, because there were times, like 2 times in the years that he was working in Traverse City, where he came out to Montana to go elk hunting during the fall. And then when Dad turned 40, he didn't go out and buy a convertible, but he, midlife crisis, right? No, you bought the convertible, not my dad, but I don't know that. But anyhow, my dad said, we are going to move to Montana. And my mother was on board with it because she had relatives in Montana whom she had visited when she was growing up. They would come out to Montana at times, and Mom would tell me about stories about laying in the back seat of the car looking out the window at Montana. I don't know how you do that, but anyhow, so she was on board with that. Nothing about Dad's move and taking our family to Montana made any sense from a financial perspective. Zero. I know Dad was making about $40,000 a year in the early 70s when we moved to Montana. The other day I did the calculation. In 2026 dollars, that's like $300,000. Yeah, that was a lot of money back then. And yet Dad, he didn't miss it because, well, here. That's not my dad fishing there, but that's the Sun River west of Augusta, Montana. We lived in Shota, which is not far from there. Dad wanted to be out. He wanted to enjoy life. He wanted to spend time with his family, with his kids, his wife in Montana. He didn't want to be consumed with work. And so he didn't look back. It was a good thing. Dad found the good life by living in Montana. He'd escape and go fishing whenever he wanted to. Every fall he would go hunting and the like, and it was just really good for him. And it was an important thing for me to see my father do that as well, just to say, you know what, there's more important things in life than earning a bunch of money. That these days go by, and you need to grab a hold of them and enjoy life and not miss out on some of the things. Well, for some reason I've lost where I'm at already. Why is it that it seems like we are constantly pursuing that which we can get out of life? You know, it's like we seem like we want a return on our investment of ourselves in life, in work and in those things. And, you know, sometimes, though, doesn't it seem like the American dream is maybe more like the American curse? Perhaps when you were growing up, and I think still today, the message is success revolves around more, bigger, better. Do you remember your high school graduation? The speeches at high school graduations are always this: boy, if you just work hard, you can be anything that you want to be. That's such a lie. You know, I wanted to be an offensive tackle in the NFL. I didn't really, but, you know, there's just some things that you can't be, and so it's just such a lie. But is life really about, you know, climbing the ladder and shattering the glass ceiling and grabbing for all the gusto that you can? Well, the writer of Ecclesiastes seems to think, no, that's not the case. In fact, we saw last week, so much is just meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind, if you will. I'm hearing things. Maybe it's just voices in my head. I always hear voices. No, I don't. Not really. But last week, when in Ecclesiastes, we were in the introduction, the prologue, if you will, And that's what the writer of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, is his name, and he surveyed the world, and his conclusions there were that life was meaningless. It was vanity, it was futility, it was like chasing after the wind. And he tried to encourage us. Do you remember? He said, by the way, after you die, nobody's going to remember you after a while. Oh, that's encouraging, thank you. And by the way, for all your toil in life, you're not going to really make much of a difference at all. So, oh, thank you. Well, today, somewhat of the same message, but today what we do, I call it, we see his research behind his conclusions that he gave us in the epilogue. But it's not all cynical. Some of it at the very end we're going to see is very, very good news. So we begin in verse 12 of Ecclesiastes 1. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. So whether this is King Solomon or not, the writer, Kohelet, I mentioned last week, that is his Hebrew name. Translated in mine, the teacher, some of your translations is the preacher. Kohelet, he adopts this Solomonic persona, like adopts this persona like he's a very wise man. It's curious in verse 12 that he says he was king over Israel and Jerusalem. That's an odd thing if it's actually Solomon to be saying that. But regardless, he's not humble. This guy is not humble. He says he applied his mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. All that is done under the heavens. That seems like a pretty tall order and a pretty major task. But he assures us that he is up to this task and he's able to do it. But what's interesting is he comes to this conclusion that God's given us the shaft. No, he doesn't say that, but in verse 13 he says, what a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. Now what does he mean by that? What a heavy burden. Well, we're going to look at a few different translations to give us some sense of what Kohelet is saying here. In one of the commentaries that I'm reading by Tremper Longman, he interprets it this way: an evil task that God has given man to keep them occupied. In the New American Standard, it's a grievous task to be afflicted with. Have you been afflicted with life? In the New King James, it's this burdensome task by which they may be exercised. Like God's got us on these hamster wheels just doing this stuff. The Christian Standard Bible says this miserable task to keep them exercised. The New Living Translation, a tragic existence. The New Revised Standard, an unhappy business. Kohelet is unabashedly critical of God, that God has almost set people up with this thing called life. That here we're going to toil, we're going to slave, we're going to suffer, and in the end we're going to look at it all and go, what was the point? What was the point? Verse 14, he says, I have seen, again, all the things that are done under the sun. I kind of question, has he really... Last week, I gave you some overview information. We see that Kohelet is on a quest, and that is one of the metaphors for Ecclesiastes. He's on a quest. But we also saw that Kohelet is given to gross exaggeration, so hyperbole, and we see that here. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. No, he hasn't. He hasn't seen all the things that are done under the sun, and yet it's a figure of speech, but his conclusion is that they're all meaningless. He's going to get into his research in a moment, But right now he's kind of summarizing his conclusion, and he's going to be looking in 4 areas of life. He's going to be looking at pleasure and wisdom and folly and then toil or work. But now he just neatly summarizes it right here for us, and I think that's good. But then he also uses a proverb. Verse 15 is a proverb. He says, here's what life is like. Here's how God has set us up in life. It's like we slave away all of our lives trying to straighten something that's bent or crooked that could never be straightened. He says, it's like life is kind of like this. You do the impossible task of counting what is lacking. Well, how are you going to do that? By definition, you can't count what is lacking because you don't know what's lacking. But that's his sense of communicating via a proverb, his frustration with life. Remember, right now he is looking at things through what we called last week a first floor perspective. He's looking at it through eyes that have been corrupted by sin, and he's looking at life that has as a totality has been corrupted by sin. Verse 16, he said, "Look, I've increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me." Again, he's really humble, isn't he? And this verse is one reason why some think that it's not Solomon. How many kings were there before Solomon? 2, right? Saul and David. Which one of those ruled over Jerusalem? Oh, really, only David. Saul ruled from Gibeah. And so that's why some interpreters say, this guy is just putting on the persona of Solomon as opposed to actually being Solomon. But he says he'd experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Hallelujah, right? Proverbs tells us that the wise person is a person who's following after God. But then Kohelet says, I've also looked at that which is diametrically opposed. Go ahead. Purple, I think. Next slide. Oh, it's green. Purple and green, they're really close, aren't they? He says, I've also applied myself to madness and folly, which is characteristic of people who are not following God. But he says, it doesn't matter which. Even though these are diametrically opposed, they're all meaningless. They're all like you're chasing after the wind. You're trying to control something that cannot possibly be controlled. But we get the sense that he establishes that wisdom is better than madness and folly, and we'll see that a little bit later here. But also in verse 18, which is another proverb, he says, here's the deal. The person who is wise understands kind of what's going on. They understand some of the futility that's associated with life, and it will cause them mental anguish. Whereas the person who is a fool, who's just kind of out there doing whatever they want to do, they're not going to recognize that. It's like wisdom dispels illusions that we might have in life. Okay, now we're going to get into some of his research. Chapter 2, verse 1. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I find that interesting. My mind still guiding me with wisdom. I did a lot of drinking when I was in college. I mean, binge drinker every weekend. I don't think wisdom ever guided me in that. Maybe you have a similar story. It's not a good story, but nevertheless. My mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself, notice multiple houses, and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female servants and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also had more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. Right. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So his first research project, and it sounds like it was a grueling one. He's going to test himself with pleasure, with the good life, if you will. Now, the way he describes it, it could only be tested like this if you are a very wealthy person, and certainly a king would have access to much wealth. But he says he's guided by wisdom in doing this. And I'm a little cynical about it. I question whether, like I said, drinking, verse 3, my mind still guiding me with wisdom, and then in verse 9, in all this my wisdom stayed with me. To me, it sounds kind of like rampant hedonism, right? Rather than as opposed to wisdom. But nonetheless, and verse 10 doesn't sound very much like wisdom. He says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. He denied himself nothing. Zero, like self-denial. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor. And it seems like this was the profit for his toil, if you will, into pleasure. He was delighted in some things. He was delighted in some things. But I wrote this. I said, pleasure's goalposts are continually moving. And you know this. I mean, have you ever really longed for whatever it was that you thought would give you great pleasure? Now, for some of us, it might be a tool, right? Oh, give me just that saw, and my life will be complete. And you get that saw, and then what happens? Oh, that's nice. Oh, and now I need that. So pleasure's goalposts are constantly moving, it seems like, in life. And that which brings pleasure today and satisfaction today always seems to be diminished by tomorrow. One of the commentators I'm reading, he says this: his determined effort and enjoyment had not brought a sufficient return on the investment. Yes, it brought him momentary pleasure. He delighted in some things. But when he looks back on it long term, all this stuff that he had labored at, and again, this was a tough research project it was all about himself. It was all self-focused. I built myself all these houses. I did all this stuff for myself. And it brought no lasting value, no lasting gain in his eyes. It was all meaningless. It was all like chasing after the wind, is his conclusion. Verse 12. When I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly, or then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. So another branch of his research project. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? Right, this is his humility again. Whoever comes after me, they're not going to be able to do this any better than I did. Verse 13. I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. Okay, so now he's researching into wisdom and also the converse of madness and folly. Nobody could do this better than him, he said. But fortunately, he does see in verse 13 that wisdom is better than folly, because a person who is wise is not like a fool who's stumbling around in the dark. A person who is wise can see obstacles in life. They can make their way around it and the like. But the fool is like they are just stumbling along in the darkness. But then he says he comes to realize that, guess what? They're both going to die. What's the point, right? Whether you're wise, whether you're foolish, you're going to die. He's kind of a glum chum, isn't he? Death levels the playing field. Maybe you've thought about that before. Wow. There's a lot of talk about equity in these days that we live in. Maybe not so much now. It's cooled off a little bit. But equity said there should be the same results for everybody. We should all get a trophy. Here's what Bobby Jameson says. Death practices an unjust equity. Death treats the wise person exactly as it treats the fool. Death stops ambition short. Given the reality of the death being no better off than the foolish, he complains. What's the point? We're all going to end up in the same place. We're all going to end up chunked into the ground somewhere. But wisdom's profit is that life will typically go better for the wise person than it will for the fool. What do I get then by being wise? This too is futility. This too is vanity. This too is meaningless. And again, he goes back to that. None of us are going to be remembered. What's the point of it all? We all must die. Verse 17. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. Just this thought just kind of popped into my head as I'm reading this. Isn't it interesting how we work so hard in these days to try to avoid death? And if you have got a lot of money, typically you can circumvent death for a while longer through medical interventions or whatever it is. But it seems like many people live longer, but still they are living with no purpose. Sorry. Again, verse 17. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish, yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom and knowledge and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. He's frustrated. He's frustrated. Work is now meaningless, or toil is meaningless. You can work your fingers to the bone, and you're going to end up dying. You can amass all this stuff, and you're going to die. And who's it going to be left to? Right? A wise person or a fool? Regardless, they didn't work for it. They're undeserving of it, and yet they're going to get it. And so he's frustrated with, are they going to appreciate it or what? Lori and I don't have quite that same problem because we don't have any children. I know maybe some of you, as you're thinking about, your, a living trust, we've got one of those, but your will or whatever it is, who am I going to leave this money to? And are they going to take care? Are they going to appreciate it, or are they just going to blow it? So he's frustrated by that. It's all meaningless because you can't guarantee that whoever you leave it to is going to take good care of it. And so it's no wonder when he gets to the end, all their days, their work is grief and pain. You labor hard all your life. You suffer, you toil, and this speaks to me. Even at night, their minds do not rest. I mean, I lay awake thinking about stuff. Probably Tom does too. Thinking about wishing I was sleeping. And so what's the purpose is what he's saying. No wonder, back in chapter 1, verse 13, what a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. It's like it's a sick joke that God has pulled on us, that's where this guy is at. Again, he's looking at it from the first floor perspective. But then he goes up a flight. He goes up to the second floor. And if you didn't have these second floor experiences in Ecclesiastes, I'd probably cut the book out of my Bible because it's just downright depressing. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God, for without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. But it's like the lights come on. He goes up to the second floor, and now he sees with eyes that are unclouded by sin, and he sees the purpose of it all. That life is a gift to be enjoyed. Life isn't something to be accomplished. We're not trying to gain anything out of life, but we need to take time and smell the roses, so to speak, and enjoy life. Again, a commentator says this. He says, the good life is centered on God and not on the striving self. The good life is centered on God and not on the striving self. What am I going to get out of life? No. Receive life as a gift. The grounds of happiness and contentment in life are exactly in that. God, you have given me good things, and I'm going to enjoy them. I don't have to be out toiling and slaving and leaving something to somebody else, but I can enjoy life in the moment. You know, contrary to the opinion of many Christians, God is not a harsh taskmaster. And God is not looking to just crush you like a bug if you mess something up. That's not our God. Rather, he's a loving Father who desires to lavish his best on those who trust him and spend time with him. Kohelet says, to the person who pleases him. How do you please God? By trusting him, by seeking him, by spending time with him. You can please God. I know a lot of people don't believe that's true, that you're nothing but a worm. You're not nothing but a worm. You can please God. God desires fellowship with people like us. The good life requires that we cease from our striving, and enjoy life in the present with God. Do you ever do that? In these 3 verses, 4 times does the Hebrew word for good show up. Now, it won't show up that exact translation in your Bible, but the word is tob, good in Hebrew. It shows up in better in verse 24. It shows up in satisfaction. I think it shows up in verse 25 in enjoyment, and in verse 26 it shows up in happiness. Good. God is all about good. Everything God made is good, right? Maybe we need to take some time and enjoy that which God has gifted us. Have you ever wasted time with God? I give you permission to waste time with God. There's these things called trees. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Take some time, a leaf off of a tree, and just spend time examining that leaf. It is amazing when you look at how God designed a leaf. And somehow, when light strikes that leaf through a process called photosynthesis, somehow it gives energy and food to that tree. But you look at just a leaf and it's... Do stuff like that, would you? Waste time with God. Ponder his goodness and his greatness. Quit working all the time. Quit it. You know, it seems like many of us, we live either in the past or we live in the future. You know, we're caught up in the past with the regrets that we have. Lori just told me the other day about another regret she has. We've all got regrets, right? Things we wish we would have done differently. Or we may live in how we were abused in the past by a parent or a relative or whatever. And so we're consumed with that. Today, the world around us teaches us to live in this being a victim, right? That's all about in the past. Now, many people live there. Other people just live in the future. You know, their dreams, one day we're going to do this. One day we're... Who lives in the present? Learn to live in the present. Kohelet seems to think there's nothing better than enjoying a meal around a table with family or friends. Right? What's he say? A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. So maybe during the day, yes, you have to work. I realize that. But in your toil, stop. Go, oh, God, thank you. How many of you ranchers still marvel at a calf being born? I mean, that's pretty incredible. I love driving down the road and seeing all these little calves. This morning when I went back home after turning the heat up here, I went back and there were these 4 calves just chasing after one another down here on the south side of the highway. I thought, that is so cool. May you never grow weary of marveling at what God is doing. You guys are in the business, so many of you, of just enjoying what God has given. And yes, it's toil at times. I understand that. But take time to enjoy it. I confess to being a recovering workaholic. I mean, I really love to work. I enjoy doing things. But it was some years ago, just after I got into being the lead pastor, God reminded me that, you know what, I'm just not that important. I'm not that important. And as much as you think you might be irreplaceable, you're not. There's always somebody coming up behind you who's going to fill your place. And so thinking about that and thinking about this idea of Sabbath, taking time off, I was able to just lay down on the couch on my day off, read a book if I wanted to, take a nap if I wanted to, and not worry that I was not accomplishing anything. Because I always used to feel guilty about doing stuff like that because I'm not accomplishing anything. I should be doing this and this and this and this and this. And the Lord was like, no, you don't need to be doing that. It's okay. Just enjoy a day. In fact, here's what Bobby Jameson says. Enjoy is a present tense verb. I think this is kind of profound. Enjoyment is only a present experience, not an item that you can stockpile for future use. In Kohelet's terms, enjoyment is gift, not gain. A lot of times when I'm driving somewhere, I'll listen to country music. Okay, I'll confess. What's interesting I find is today's country music, Tom, it's a lot like the rock and roll that I listened to in college. It's just weird, but anyhow. So I like listening to the country music, and there's this one, I don't like all this music, but some of it, and this one song by Luke Combs, Days Like These. To me, as I hear that song, it's like what Kohelet says, to enjoy life. So I'm going to play, and this is going to come on really loud, Ken. Go ahead, hit... punch it once. Audrey. Uh-oh. Can you advance it to the next one? Is it? Oh, yeah. Okay, now hit it again. One more time. Okay, but do it one more time, because there's a song embedded in this, a video. Let me try it. Oh, come on. Yeah, sometimes technology is great, isn't it? Oh, well, maybe it's not going to do it. Maybe you know the song. You don't want me to sing it, but I've got some of the lyrics here. So he says, days like these are worth more than gold, but they can't be bought and they can't be sold. On days like these, when the sun shines bright, I feel like it's all going to be all right. When the sky is blue and the grass is green, how much better can it be? If I got you and you got me, we got everything we need. And even if it grew on trees, well, money can't buy days like these. They don't come around as much as they ought to, so soak them up when they do. But those days are like these, they don't forget. And if you think it through, they're all we got. Really, what do we have? We have the present. I don't know that Luke is a great theologian or anything. I don't know that he's a Christian. I don't know anything about the guy. But to me, it's like God has gifted us with these days. Let's enjoy them. Each day is a gift from God. Not just when the sky is blue and the grass is green. These days, good days are days when it's raining, right? Or snowing or whatever. But each day is unique. Each day is irreplaceable. There's no do-overs when it comes to days. Have you seen that? Groundhog Day is just a movie, right? You don't get to repeat days over and over. So take time to enjoy each one and thank God for it. I'm grateful for the example my dad left me when I think about his willingness to leave behind a life of workaholism and a huge salary for the good life in Montana. Maybe my dad and Kohelet were working off the same script, I don't know. But here's how I kind of summarize today's message. We profit from life when we can simply enjoy what God has given us. That's what the profit in life is all about, receiving life as a gift. Now, I'm not saying you should quit your job and leave it all behind. That's between you and God. He might be calling you to do that because you're too focused on that. But don't forget this. No matter how much you love your job, it doesn't love you back. Your job does not love you back. And remember this also. We are human beings. We're not human doings. We're human beings. Take time just to be with the Lord. Take time to enjoy that which He has given you. Share a meal. Take time during your working day just to stop, breathe it in, live in the present. Stop trying to accomplish all this stuff. Receive life as the gift as it is. Live in the present and enjoy it. Enjoy it. Let's pray. Oh, Father, thank you, Lord, for the gift of life. Lord, forgive us when we get so focused on either the past hurts or the future, our dreams, how it's going to be in the future, Lord, that we forget to live with you in the present. God, would you help us to be able to receive each day as a gift? God, if we're not doing that right now, God, I pray that you would bring conviction in our lives. And Lord, even in these moments, Lord, you would just tell us that we're not, frankly, all that important, that we are replaceable, that we might as well enjoy today. Lord, it's not that we don't have to work, because we do. But God, may we not be all about what we can accomplish, what we can get out of life. But Lord, may we receive so much of it as a gift from you, and that we would enjoy it in the moment, that we would take time to spend with our families, Lord, to have a meal together, to laugh, Lord, just to enjoy this gift that you've given us. So Lord, thank you for this reminder. Thank you for this view from the second floor of how life is intended to be. Lord, may we receive it as the gift that it is. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, well, let's stand and we're going to sing a closing song.